All right. So performance and scalability in WooCommerce or of WooCommerce. So today we're gonna be sharing some of our experience solving performance and scalability problems and common solutions that we've seen. So hopefully you'll learn a thing or two here from our experience. So as Olga said, I'm the CTO here at Saucal. I'm on Twitter and GitHub on those handles if you want to follow me. Or I'm more so in other social media, but I don't use a lot of social. So if you look me up in Twitter, you might see that I don't post pretty much a lot. So yeah, but you're free to follow me. Now, let's start. Performance. Who didn't hear things like WooCommerce doesn't scale or WooCommerce is slow? Whenever I hear these things, this is what I feel like doing. These things are just not true. Why do people keep saying that? Then that's because typically on most implementations of WooCommerce, it's not just WooCommerce, it's WooCommerce plus a bunch of other plugins. And not all plugins are built for scalability. WooCommerce itself, for sure. Some plugins well built, for sure. Not all. So today we're going to be looking at front-end issues, back-end issues, CDNs, caching, queries, and everything in between. So we identify these issues and know where they come from. First, what is performant? How do you know if a site is performant? At the end of the day, it's all about the end user experience or the shoppers of the store. How does it work from a desktop computer with a broadband high-speed connection? How does it work from a throttle connection, like mobile or somewhere remote where the internet is low? We know that it's not fast everywhere. Can the site handle a flash sale of 1,000 users trying to check out at the same time? What about 5,000 users? That's literally 5,000 people going, adding things to the cart, trying to check out within a 5-minute time frame. Does it flash unstyled text for some users? Like we've all seen that situation where you load a page and while it's loading and getting CSS, elements start shifting places. The answer to all of this, it's metrics. So some of these metrics are more on the back end of WordPress, and some of them are more on the front end. Let's start with the back end. So some metrics. From a timeline perspective, the backend is the first thing that happened. The browser only sent the request so far. So let's see what we can do to identify what happened on the backend of the code, which is your WordPress code. First, I'm going to be just a disclaimer here. There's no standard metrics on the backend as there are on the front end, as we'll see later. So I'm going to be identifying some stages or some components, which are the two groups that I put here, borrowing terms from the tools that are used to get these metrics. So first, bootstrap time. This is basically the stage of the WordPress load from the start of the request until the init hook finishes executing. Now, another disclaimer here. This is pseudocode. This is not the actual WordPress code. I just wanted to represent here a few of the things that WordPress does during this stage. So it loads the WP config, includes the plugins, runs some hooks like plugins loaded, includes the theme functions PHP file, and until the init hook. There are some more hooks and other things. So yeah, sorry, I seem to have some issues with my headphones here. Let me get them down. Actually, let me switch back to, hold on a second, sorry. I'm gonna be using this one, okay.
Yeah, Matias, you're sharing all your screen right now.
Yeah, so I just moved there. So, okay, sorry for that. So that was bootstrap time. Now, request processing time. This is everything after the init hook until the template include filter. This page, this section of the code is basically WordPress trying to figure out what needs to be served on that page. So this is going to be the main query of the page, any redirects that need to happen, and deciding which template file from the theme needs to be loaded. What else? Template render time. This is basically up and from the time that the template is included until the end of the request. This is everything from enqueuing JavaScript, inlining JavaScript or CSS, going through the post that needs to be rendered, rendering widgets and other queries from some blocks, the footer, more enqueuing, etc. So that's it for, and this is going to be typically the longest of the stages. Now, the page generation time is basically both, like all of the three previous stages grouped as one metric. So it's basically the whole time from the beginning of the request until the somebody's with the mic.
I muted the person, Matias.
Okay, thank you. Now, let's go through some component metrics that contribute to one or all of these stages before. You have database time, which is basically the time that MySQL takes to answer to all of the queries or during a page generation. And you have external request time, which is all the time that it takes WordPress to perform API calls, calling itself or running a cron or something like that that happens on a few page requests. Okay, so now that we've seen some metrics that we can take, let's go through some of the tools that we can use to get them. First, Query Monitor. This is the most comprehensive of all the tools that I'm going to be mentioning here, and is the one that works in most scenarios that you want to measure things, since it's a WordPress plugin and most of the functionality works without no tweaking on the PHP stack. So this will let you measure things like database time, external request time, as long as the external requests are being done by the WordPress HTTP API. If you're using a library that goes through Gustle or directly through curl, that time is not going to be measured by Query Monitor. But if you use WP HTTP get or WP request WP remote get or WP remote post, those functions will be measured by Query Monitor. And yeah, it will tell you query time, as I've said, and it will measure page generation time and memory usage as well for that particular page. Then WP CLI, you might think, why are we measuring things with WP CLI? It has a profile command which you can run on a particular URL, and it will let you know specifically about all the three stages, the three stages bootstrap, request processing time, and template render time. And you can also measure time execution of a specific hook. One thing though is that typically it's not as reliable as Query Monitor in terms of the accuracy of the data, because in most hostings or some environments, you get a different resource allocation to CLI than what you get compared to what you get on the web version of WordPress and WooCommerce. So you might get more memory or more CPU allocation to CLI than you get to the web, and therefore the results might be different. So it's not as reliable as Query Monitor, but it's useful to get some data. Then we have some APMs services, which APM stands for Application Performance Monitoring. So you have New Relic and Blackfire. Both of these will let you measure code execution down to function level, which is as granular as you'll get. New Relic specifically is readily available or easily installable in managed hostings like Kinsta, WordPress VIP, or Convisio, for example. And Blackfire is easily installable in sites that you have control over the PHP configuration or the Nginx configuration. If you have SSH access and you can install packages, you likely can install Blackfire as well. Both of them will offer similar metrics. So those are both options useful. And last, more oriented for local environments, not so much for production. You have Xdebug Tracer and XHProf. I didn't have a logo for XHProf. It doesn't have it, but it's really useful. And this will also let you trace functions down to the function execution down to the functional level. And using a plugin that we forked from HumanMade recently and have on our GitHub, you should be able to get a flame graph of the function calls that looks something like this. Here you can see that there's a root element, which is the whole page being generated, and then you have different functions that are called. This is not a flame graph from WordPress. I couldn't get a more good-looking graph recorded. This is something I found online, but it's basically what you get on a WordPress execution. We found a bunch of bottlenecks by using a tool like this on a local environment. And something like we found a particular plugin that was not properly caching what another plugin was generating. So we've seen that it was low when these two plugins need to work together. So we opened this up and saw that there was a particular function being called more than once, and the cache was basically not working. So yeah, we were able to change some of the plugins to work better with each other. And if it wasn't for this, we were not going to be able to debug this, or we'll spend a lot of time. So that's it for the backend. Let's jump to the front end. Here we have much more standardized metrics. So let's focus first on some usability metrics. We have the time to first byte, which is the time that it takes from the moment that the browser sent the request. And the server needs to receive the request, process it, and start sending data. And the time to first byte is when the browser starts receiving some of the data from the server. I'm going to get some water here. So this could include things like if you have latency to the server, this is going to impact your time to first byte. And this also includes, as we've seen before, all the page generation time. The server needs to generate the page, and you can improve that to get the lower time here. So I'm gonna have on this front end screenshot some recommendations, which are from Google on the times that this should take these stages. but I'm not going to get too deep into what's a recommendation. So because we'll be here all day. So next, first, contentful paint. This is the time where the browser, again, from the beginning of the request, that it takes to load a portion of the page and make something visible to the user. This is more easily seen on a throttle connection like mobile, or by simulating a slow connection on your browser. And here's a strip of screenshots to help visualize this. We've all seen this before, like if you really slow down your connection or you have internet problems, you start seeing the page slowly being rendered on the browser, and the first couple of elements that appear, we have another metric called first input delay, which is the time that it takes the browser to respond to an interaction to any element on the first contentful paint. So let's say you had that search bar appear, and you want to click on the icon, on the search icon there. The browser might be busy rendering the rest of the page, and it will take some amount of milliseconds or seconds if it's too slow or the CPU is too slow. And that time is the first input delay. In contrast, we have time, which is the time that the browser takes to start reliably responding to user interaction without a long delay in between. So basically, this is the time where the page becomes usable to the user, and the user can interact, click buttons, and there's no real delay on them. There might be layout shifts, they might be still things being loaded, but the page is usable already. Now, let's go through some more technical metrics, which are not necessarily relevant to usability, but are still useful to track. We have load time, which is the time that it takes the browser to render all of the immediate chain of requests that need to happen from the HTML being received. That includes JavaScript that is not deferred or async, CSS, what else? Images that are not lazy loaded. So all of that's going to trigger an event, and that's the load time. And it's typically recommended to have it to be less than 5 seconds for sure. It should be much faster, but that's the current recommendation on average. So fully loaded time, on the other hand, you might see this on some benchmarks like GTmetrix, for example, which we'll look at soon. But this is a time that includes deferred scripts being loaded and executed, async scripts, images being lazy loaded, and maybe some extra networking happening, like because there's a carousel, JavaScript carousel that triggers another image that will extend your fully loaded time on GTmetrix. So it's typically recommended that you don't have anything happen past the loaded time of the context of store. Of course, if you're building an application, you'll have things loading in and out of the page a lot. But, typically, there shouldn't be anything, but in some cases, like if you have a carousel images, it's best to have them load later than at the beginning on the immediate requests. So let's go through some tools to measure these front-end performance metrics. First, you have Google Lighthouse, which is available in Chrome or as a CLI tool. It will measure things using synthetic measuring, like simulating scenarios, low connection, different screen sizes, etc. It's free, but you need to install something or have a tool on your browser. As an alternative, you have web.devmeasure, which is basically an online version of Lighthouse. This will let you know, this is useful to have as a good way to getting before and after snapshots. You can get this in PDF and download the reports in PDFs, and see the actual source report from Lighthouse that this generates on and get that as a record. And from Google, the best of the tools is PageSpeed Insights. This is actually Google Lighthouse on steroids because it compares to data from actual visitors of your site, likely using anonymized Google Analytics data. But it's not only synthetic testing, but actual field data from people actually visiting your site. So that's really useful to get how your actual audience is working with their site. And last, we have GTmetrix, which used to be like cover a lot more ground and make the Lighthouse or audits from Google Chrome and make them nicer and easier to understand. Nowadays, it's mostly useful for us, at least, to get like easy to understand reports, and also, most importantly, to be able to configure the device that we're going to be running on, or the location which we're going to be testing from. So if you have a site in Australia and your audience is in Australia, you want to measure how your site behaves from an Australian location. Because if you test from Google, for example, you might be getting times from like the server that is testing, or your location. If you use Lighthouse, you'll get latency from Australia, and that adds to your time, all the metrics basically, because that's time to first byte for everything and all the requests that the browser needs to make. So changing the location is the main reason why we still resort to this. So enough with the boring theory here. Let's go through some solutions, let's say, which are not really fixing the issue or actually creating more issues. So if you have a slow time to first byte, from a timeline perspective, this is the first thing that happens, as we've seen before. So this is where I would first look. So one of the reasons could be like slow queries. There's several reasons why queries are slow. One of them might be that tables are not properly indexed. This may be the result of not being properly created, or sometimes it's the result of like upgrade routines from, let's say, WooCommerce, that sometimes adds extra indexes to tables, and that process takes time. If your store was large enough at the time and the server you were running your store on was not powerful enough, that process might have failed. So you end up with a table which didn't get the indexes created, and you might have a broken schema there. So that might be one of the problems. You might think then, why don't I just index all the tables? That's not recommended, because the more indexes you add, the more indexes that MySQL will have to maintain, and that will slow down the writes, and that could directly impact in your checkout time, for example. Now, in some cases, you cannot just add indexes. This is something that WooCommerce had to deal with before moving to a order like a custom table, like what WooCommerce is moving soon. We cannot just index post meta. So what they did was create a separate data table with the extracted from the post meta, but that is used to search through things like address, first name, last name, amount of the orders, etc. So without this, things like WooCommerce admin, analytics, or the reporting from WooCommerce will not be possible. Now, let's say you have the indexes or the lookup tables properly in place. Your queries might not be taking proper advantage of them. Again, there's several reasons for this, but one important thing to use to get why the queries are not being, the queries are not using the indexes is to use the explain statement in MySQL. you can basically, for those of you that didn't use it before, you can just copy the query into phpMyAdmin or whatever system that you get on your hosting to access MySQL, and add explain at the beginning, and you'll get a bit of information about how is MySQL dealing with that query. I'm not going to get too deep into this right now, but on the materials that we'll send later, you'll get some links to useful explainers posts that we've seen that will help you understand the output of this command. And another thing that is important, if you're querying data multiple times, cache the data and invalidate that cache data properly. Why is this important? Let's say you have something simple, a title of the post. You cache the title, and of course, it's so simple, you're not going to be actually caching the title, but just for example, you read the title, you cache it, you change it at some point, and you want to read it again. You don't want the old title that you had cached before to be the result of that second read. And this becomes really, really important on when you have persistent cache in place, because by default, when you don't have Redis or memcached or anything like that, the queries, when you don't have anything like that, the cache for WordPress cache things only in memory for that page request. But when you have persistent cache, that cache data lives on through several requests. So if you don't invalidate the cache, you will get the old data on the next page, and so on until it expires or something like that. One important thing is that if you're dealing with frequently queried data that is not meant to change a lot, it's better to just regenerate the data instead of just invalidating, because if it's an expensive process, it might be a visitor of yours that get to be that single page request that is in charge of generating that data and then caching it for the rest of the people. So it's better to do it when you're invalidating, which is typically an action on the admin side or something like that. So yeah, have that in mind. Now, what else? Still on time to first byte. External assets. This is not technically time to first byte territory, but you can do things here that affect like metrics on the front end. For example, you can save a few requests later if you inline small assets like CSS, small portions of CSS instead of creating a file for that. Same for JavaScript, SVGs. Let's say use SVGs for icons and stuff like that. You can inline those SVGs into the browser. Most browsers nowadays support inline SVGs, but you shouldn't inline everything. Like you shouldn't inline a lot of PNGs, which you can inline with base64 encoded data, but you might incur into other problems that will affect your time to first byte. For example, if your file system is slow to read files, if you read a large file, you will get a slower time to first byte. Same thing if you have not a lot of memory. When you're reading the image into memory to output it, you might get, again, memory overflow issue. So do not inline everything. That's important. Expensive processes that they should be cached. This includes anything from data crunching, like requesting stuff from an API. One case that we've seen here is there was a Facebook review feed plugin that one. So we were requesting on the API to Facebook all of the time. And that was really having a toll on the time to first byte. So catch that. And if it can, it should be offloaded to a background worker. One tool that is included in WooCommerce that helps with this is Action Scaler. This is going to be basically a replacement, in my opinion, to the stock WP cron when you need reliability. So yeah, in terms of API, it's almost one-to-one. So if you're comfortable with WP cron, you can use this pretty much straight away. So more time to first byte issues. You should cache static content. You should. This is by setting the proper caching headers. These are like cache controls, expires, e-tags. These are useful headers that you can set on your pages that will set the browser to cache that particular page and not request it again the next time, because it's basically the same and you allowed it to be cached in the browser. If you have a CDN and you set the proper caching headers, you will also get the CDN to cache this page and not have WordPress and everything happen all over again to generate that page if that's not cached in the browser anymore. So what happens if you have a particular, like, let's say you're in the About Us page, but you have a cart icon that's displayed on the header on all pages. That cart icon on WooCommerce, for example, that is changing depending on the cart, but the full page itself is static. So what you can do here is use Ajax, which WooCommerce does with the Fragments API, and update the cart icon only. You should be careful though, because sometimes you have a lot of things changing here and there on the page and not just one icon. So in some cases, it might be better to just generate the page again instead of complicating the maintainability of the code. What else? Last but not least, time to first byte. If you need plugins at scale, audit them. It's really important to know that not all plugin developers follow best practices. So we've seen more than one case of plugin that has a nice description, fits perfectly in terms of functionality to what our customers want. And then we go and try it or inspect the code and see that it does weird things that shouldn't be done at scale. So definitely keep that in mind. Now, let's move to slow first contentful paint. Now, the browser already sent data to the browser. The server already sent data to the browser. And let's see how we can make that data being sent more optimal for the browser to deal with. First, an easy one, you can minify CSS and JavaScript. That's done by, there's different plugins that allows you to do this, but you can do this while building, if you're compiling the code yourself. You can, if you use Webpack to compile CSS or concatenate JavaScript, that's likely going to be minified by default. You should also defer asset load when possible. What things can you defer? Lazy loading images, for example. If you're inserting images from a theme or a function from like an image from the library, use the WP get attachment image. It's best practice, and we'll cover the lazy loading and anything that comes later in terms of performance for images like source set or things like that. Always follow best practice. But if you're building the image tag yourself, remember to use the loading attribute, which is the current standard for lazy loading images. You can also defer JavaScript on the page. There's several things that you can defer. One thing that is not affecting the layout or the UI is scripts that handle user event. For example, a click or a mouse or buttons actions. That JavaScript can be deferred. That doesn't need to be loaded immediately when the page loads. But for example, if you have a JavaScript that changes some portion of the layout because you cannot do certain things with CSS and you need to resort to JavaScript, those scripts, if you defer those, you will get some layout shifting and the page will not look stable after it's loaded. So it's better to not defer those scripts. Now, there's also, on JavaScript, you can also async things. Async versus defer is, the main difference is that with async, you don't control the order in which the scripts get executed on the page. Whereas defer is all the scripts are executed in the same order that they're defined in the HTML. So async is only viable for the case of an add scripts like AdSense or things like that, where it doesn't matter where it's executed, you just need the HTML to be there. So if you have the HTML, async will definitely be executed after the HTML is on the page. So yeah, it should be possible to do async on those. What else? You can pre-connect to external domains. This means like if you're using a CDN for some JavaScript library, or you're loading images from a different domain than what the site domain is. Sorry, I'm gonna be. You can use headers or tags on the head section of the HTML to pre-connect to these domains. This will save some time doing DNS resolve connections and have the connection ready when the actual HTML requests something from that domain. Another important thing is avoid unnecessary redirects. The most common thing that we've seen here is that sometimes when you're making a post and you're manually typing the URL and instead of selecting it from some dropdown or some helper search, you will not maybe add the final trailing slash, which is part of the canonical URL. And then when people start clicking on that menu item or on that post, the browser goes to the non-canonical URL, where you linked, and then does a redirect to the canonical URL. If that's not properly cached with the caching headers that we've seen before, that could be up to a second maybe to WordPress to initialize process request until it realizes, hey, I need to redirect this, but you will save processing time on the server and on the browser if you link to the correct URL. Also, use a CDN. This is like we've seen before, it will solve a lot of the problems just by setting one up. In the case of Cloudflare, since it has a large network of servers worldwide, it will serve the requests closer to your visitors, and that will save latency time on all the network requests that your site makes. So even if you don't solve a lot of the issues that you could solve by changing code, this will be already faster for your visitors just by having Cloudflare. Remember to enable the proxy, the little cloud icon on Cloudflare. Otherwise, it will just be a DNS and you won't get the benefits like the content delivered in the network that they have. Also, make static assets properly cacheable. This is going to be figured out if you're using a managed host like Kinsta, WordPress VIP, WP Engine, anything that have a proper static assets cacheable. So if you have the right headers, you should be okay. And one thing that's important is to invalidate these static assets properly when you're making a new release. Let's say you're releasing a new version of the theme and the CSS changed. It's typically best practice to, when you're enqueuing the CSS, to include a version at the end of the URL, so that when you bump the version of the theme, you're making a new release, you push it, and then the browser starts requesting a different URL, which is not going to be cached. So that that will avoid the issue of, hey, my customers are getting the old layout, or some weird situation where some portions of the HTML is not styled because they're not getting the newest version of the style. So yeah, and with that, I think that's it. We're ready. So yeah, hopefully that was helpful for you. And yeah, let's open up for questions now. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Hey guys, so thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Matias. Anyone have questions? You can use the raise your hand, just like unmute yourself and maybe turn on the camera so we can see you and ask a question. We will be really happy to answer. Okay, I can see that we have one question here. I'm not sure I will pronounce the...
It's a sheesh. You can just call me Ash.
Ash, okay, sorry. So does WooCommerce have any resources on CRO, Matias? That's a question.
Sorry, what's
It's just it's like optimizing conversions. I already have a bunch of WooCommerce websites, and the conversion rate is like at 3%. I was just thinking if there's any other things I could do. Is there a way for like and I know that this is probably not what you guys do, but like if you guys could take a look and give me some ideas. I'm going through heat maps. I'm going through Hotjar recordings. I have already got my low page load time on GTmetrix down to an A. Everything gets done in like 1.3 seconds. So I was just thinking if there are any other things that I can think of, or that I can't think of, that you guys could probably give some insight on.
Yeah, conversion, I mean, according to what Google tells us, like it all depends on how fast the site is, but that's one component. We've seen that conversion also depend on the layout of the site, like if the layout, and that's more of a design thing that it's not what we try to cover here. But yeah, we will take a look and get back to you if we have any resource to help you on that conversion thing. So yeah, we were oriented this more to the performance component of the conversion. But yeah, we can definitely take a look and send you some recommendations there.
Perfect, thanks.
Hey, anyone else? Any other question, guys? Or if you want to say anything, please, like it's an open mic situation. Anyone?
Yeah, I'll bring something up. Hi.
Hi,
I'm very interested in block themes that, are new this year. And of course, WooCommerce Blocks is expanding rapidly with the new cart and checkout experience and all the other blocks and template editings and things. It's an exciting area. Page builders have been, a segment of the WordPress community in recent years, but a growing segment, and now, of course, it's core. And I'm curious, related to this this performance presentation, if you have any data so far, early data on block themes and how they, any problems with them, how they're making it better along these lines. Performance.
Like concrete data, where we can maybe check if WooCommerce, the WooCommerce team have concrete data. In terms of performance, blocks are typically well built compared to other page builders out there. So from the performance perspective, since unless you're using a lot of server generated blocks like widgets, like that try to adapt the old way of doing things to the block layout, you should get better performance by using blocks. But it's also true that a lot of those use React, and React is not a lean thing to just throw on the browser. So there's pros and cons with this whole block. It helps with usability and editability, and you can get flexibility on that side. But I think On the performance side, it might become cumbersome in some situations, depending on the blocks that you use, because even though WooCommerce has the official blocks, there's a lot of libraries of blocks, and not all of them are built for performance as well. So it's
For sure, yeah.
You have to audit and check which one was better. So
right, yes, there's a lot of those kind of add-on, you know, what are they called? I forgot the names. Well, Genesis Blocks Pro for one. The add-ons definitely need a lot of investigation. And in Core, as you mentioned, you know, previously it was jQuery, like for choosing variations, for example, but now they have the newer libraries, which is, you know, where it's going to take time for all that to get well polished, but it's an exciting area. So
yeah, and as developers, I mean, especially in my case, I'm more oriented to the backend side of things. I handle jQuery pretty much well, and we have to learn React. And since the way of doing things on React is, like, at least on the Gutenberg side of things, is always changing. When you try to learn something, and by the time you took a grasp on it, they already changed the way because it's so rapidly evolving. So the best practices there are still being defined as we go. So it will take a while to get to a good place.
And let's hope that decision is vanilla JS.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is it Sean? Not sure the correct.
It's Sean.
Sean, okay.
Yeah,
thank you very much for the question. We have a comment from Jacob that Gutenberg doesn't necessarily use React on the client side. Matias, wanna?
Yeah, it's not necessarily there, but in some cases, like if you have a UI of like drop down or things like that, it may use it. It's not necessarily present. So yeah, that's a nice observation, Jacob. Thank you.
I thought and say hi, Olga. This is great. Thank you so much, Matias. My name is Shani Banerjee. I'm actually a developer advocate with WooCommerce. So I'm here to learn a little bit about how you guys are essentially sharing your knowledge with each other and kind of fielding some of these questions so I can bring back to my team and kind of get some, if there is like a, you know, office hours that we can do on some of these questions, things like that. You know, if you have anything in particular that you would like to see happen in terms of development, obviously you can find us on Slack, but I just wanted to say hello and that I'm here and I am listening.
Thank you. Nice to have you here. So everyone that needs something specifically from the WooCommerce team, Shani is the person to go to, and that's who to contact with.
Complain a little bit. Well, Shani, thank you very much. And again, thank you very much for this brilliant opportunity to organize an event like that. I don't think we would be able to have such like a great turnout without the support and all the sharing from WooCommerce. And we're really happy to have this online meetup together with WooCommerce. Anyone else want to say anything? Just a shout out or anything? Okay.
There is one more I could add in if we're interested. I don't know time wise, but HPOS, it's you know, the new order tables. Is there any early data, anything on that is worth mentioning at this point?
You mean from the official implementation that WooCommerce team is working on, or the one that I think what was the other company that worked for like a couple of years ago that had an implementation of that?
Yeah, I understand it's beta, but it's coming in, I think, the next core release, but it's not, you know, fully, I wouldn't say it's ready to release yet. It's just it's being tested, but supposedly it will make a big difference, although it may take years for all the themes and plugins and custom functions to catch up with the right, you know, objects and methods and such.
I think Shani can answer that. So
yeah. So we're actually doing a few different upgrade parties. So right now we are in the call for testing phase. We have tested it extensively internally with a number of our extensions and themes. So at this point, yeah, we are looking to you guys to actually implement it and test it and do the migration. So if you go to the blog, And if you go to the Slack, we just did an upgrade party that was kind of like under the radar, kind of small. And then the next one is going to be October 17th and 18th. And so that kind of pulls back into Matt's original upgrade party concept. But essentially what we're doing is we have developers that specifically built and implemented the HPOS migrations. They're the ones who are going to be helping you along that. So if you have questions in real time, that is absolutely synchronous. And then we also have GitHub discussions open that if you run into any issues, if you're doing it asynchronously, you can go ahead and post there and we can help to resolve your issues there. So that gives you a little bit. And so far, it seems like performance-wise, we don't have actual measurements because we haven't been able to get through exactly as you said. We're looking at about 1,000 extensions that we're going to have to get up to speed. So and obviously there's going to be varying aspects to that, to be completely frank, you know, depending on how many particular plugins or extensions, or like you said, I think it really fits in with this performance and scalability conversation that we're having here and these specific solutions, because there are other ways in addition to HPOS that are going to really increase your performance. So I think kind of checking in with all of these elements together and kind of seeing you know, how much of a performance improvement you do receive kind of early on, and then as you it maybe implement some of these solutions around it should be helpful. But as far as what our internal developers and some of the external ones have said, they're seeing a lot of improvement.
Great. I'm going to start testing it for sure. I'm excited about that one too, but so far I haven't, but it's time.
Yeah, I'm going to be testing on that on my side for sure. It's been a long time overdue, so it's going to be very welcome.
Please do. And if you have anything, like I said, the upgrade party is on the 17th and 18th. We have a specific channel for it on the Slack. So if you can drop in and just, you know, tell us your pros and woes, we're here to listen and help you get through those errors.
Conveniently after WooSesh a few days before, I believe, so, or the week before. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, guys. I think time-wise, we should be wrapping it up. A few words I want to say at the end. First of all, thank you, Shani and Sean and Ash, for question and discussion. Appreciate that. Thank you very much, Matias. Again, guys, if you want to say something in the chat, please feel free and add each other on LinkedIn and connect. And please feel free to add me on LinkedIn as well. And we are really looking forward to hear for your feedback about an event and suggestions for the next topics to cover on technical meetup, or if you want someone to speak, or you have someone, you are someone who wants to speak, or you want to hear someone to be a speaker, reach out to me on WooCommerce Slack or via my email, which is olga@saucal.com. Feel free to subscribe to Saucal newsletter. We post often articles about the performance and technical parts as well. And we will be sharing the recording and the materials with you later this week or next week. And I think the plan is also to post this recording on YouTube that people can go back and watch it, even if they didn't come to an event, were not able to, or didn't find out about an event in time. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I hope everyone have the great rest of their Wednesday. And we will notify you when we have the next event in preparation. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye.